Hello, and welcome to another edition of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong. And today I'm super lucky to be, especially just before a long holiday weekend, with Lisa Hammack, who's Director of Global Sales Enablement with Syssense. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the company, it's pretty cool. They accelerate product innovation by leveraging AI and machine learning. It's a global platform that drives better and faster decisions. So, Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And so I was auditioning for your voiceover guy for your company. So I hope I passed the audition too.
You did. You did a great job.
Thank you. So you and I were chatting a week ago, and just sort of like in passing, you mentioned this hypothesis selling thing, and it my ears perked up, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Let's talk about it. So how would you define hypothesis selling?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, let's see, if we go back to elementary school, in our science classes, if you remember, a hypothesis definition was an educated guess.
Okay.
Now, that's not exactly what it is when it comes to hypothesis selling. But so the way I define it is it's actually taking the time to do a lot of research to understand your buyer, both the person you're selling to and the company you're selling to, a lot about the industry, and coming into that first call with them with a perspective on what you think their problems are. And so basically not waiting to just ask them a zillion questions because they probably already have fatigue from going through that with other vendors, but coming with an opinion of what you think, their problems are that things that you can help them solve.
Yeah, and the thing that I like about that is I've often said that there's sort of a finite list of stuff that our solutions can impact, right? So it's for different
Absolutely.
stakeholders. So I do think you can draw a hypothesis about that, and I do think it's helpful. How would you? This sort of came into my mind as you and I were talking about it. Like, is there a difference in hypothesis selling from like solution selling or value selling? How do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think there definitely is. It's funny because having done this a long time, not to age myself, but so you look at the different sales methodologies. So you hear insight selling, is one too. Insight selling is more about kind of educating them on like what you've seen about the market, what's going on. So bringing in that, all of these are about being a trusted advisor and a consultative,
Yeah.
and really caring about the buyer's journey versus caring about like what my product's going to do, right? And so if you look at value selling to me is more about coming in and learning what their problems are,
Okay.
and figuring out how our solution can best help them solve those problems. And then on the other end, there's the ROI piece.
Yeah.
What is their, looking at what is the return on investment going to be by using our solution to solve those problems.
Yep.
So that's why. So I think the difference. I think that hypothesis kind of going into the beginning of the sales process and really having an opinion and hopefully maybe teaching them something new or getting them to think about things differently. And what that does is, I think it has, if you do it correctly, it can shorten your sales cycle. It can also, hopefully get them to prioritize, answering getting this problem solved. Where a lot of times, you're in there, you're competing against different projects. So it's getting to hopefully shorten that cycle and get them to think like, yes, this is a problem that we need to solve.
Yeah. You make me think it's like there's guiding the customer versus open-ended, what keeps you awake at night. So if I'm asking you that, Lisa,
Yeah.
you're giving me back what you already know. It has no value to you. Maybe it might one day when I connect to it, but like
Yeah.
we should know this, which is what I'm hearing. And Jim Dickey with Sales Mastery put out a buyer study, puts it out every year, and this is a really sad stat that came out of it, that buyers say sellers are the ninth place they go out of 10 places for insight. But the only ray of hope, or a big ray of hope in there, was that they said, "Oh, but I will talk to them." But
Yeah.
they got to be bringing me something, and so this is kind of what I'm hearing
Yeah.
you talk about. So it also occurs to me that in order to do this right, it might be uh, sales leaders, sales enablement, or marketing. Like we've got to support reps in this hypothesis selling environment, right? Because they're not ready to go there. What kind of support do they need, or do you give your team to be able to execute this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's absolutely a collaborative effort by really all parts of the business. And so when I look at my role in enablement, it's obviously one, giving them the skills that are needed. So things like, listening skills, time management, believe it or not, taking the time, putting it on your calendar to do this research, to really understand the market, to understand your business, to be more of an expert. Definitely, I'm a big advocate of, you know, um, teaching, trying, and then doing. So, giving them scenarios where we're doing, practicing research and coming up with our hypothesis to see, like, how close are we? Both in customers that we've already, sold to is a great example. So, and with that, if you look at revenue ops, having them working with them to really analyze who we've sold to, what are our customers, our current customers doing, and really using some of that analysis to help us drive some of our opinions. And then of course marketing, customer stories, case studies, all the things that are, will help us support as we're going through the selling mechanism focused on the buyer. So I
Yeah.
really think it's a collaborative effort, and it really takes everybody, working together to arm our salespeople with the right information.
Yeah, and it's funny because you're kind of hitting on something that I believe is like unbelievably important in today's selling environment. That buyers are very. I read a buyer seller insights blog that says there is bad buying just as there is bad selling, and it was one of the
Sure,
first time. But
sure.
that like we all beat ourselves up for like, oh, the worst salesperson, but that
Yeah,
it's buyers are guilty of suboptimal decisions, and that's what comes to mind as you're talking through this, that we're actually
yeah,
there's such a huge benefit. I'm going to talk about the human aspect of this. In our previous call, you talked about like some sellers fear having an opinion, and I love leaning into more lately on the podcast, like the human side of this. How do we deal with that fear to get them confident enough to actually, because this is gutsy, as you say, this is
it is.
consulting, and there's consulting to selling, but this is kind of almost real consulting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question too, and I think some of it is like I said, or arming them with information that they can feel confident in, and then sometimes they just have to go do it. And what they'll find out, at least the sellers that I've worked with, is it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah,
And what you find out, if the buyer comes back and says, that's actually not correct, they'll typically go on and they'll tell you what is how they see it. And so based on that, you're opening yourself up to have a much deeper conversation, to do that second and third level discovery and really understand their business from their perspective. So sometimes you learn more by being wrong, because then they're
yeah.
willing to say, no, you're wrong. This is what it is. So I think just being brave, trying it a few times and seeing where that conversation takes you, is such a benefit that people just, the more you do it, the better you're going to be.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of categories, and I'm thinking back to my own business as well, like categories of things you can hypothesize about. And I feel like there's like
Yeah.
one about, hey customer, like there's a missed opportunity, like if you're not leveraging this technology, or there's avoiding a bad thing. Like I think about, we're working with a technology company that manages risk, and it's like, if you
Hmm.
don't do this, like these four bad things could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, what comes to mind about sort of the category of hypothesis that we're bringing?
Yeah, so I'll use an example in our business. So we sell embedded analytics, and so companies will come to us and they'll say, "Oh, we're starting to see some churn. We have some of our customers saying we're just not giving, because companies are very data driven today, right? And they're not getting the right analytics because a lot of these are software companies that are selling solutions to their customers. Um, but what we're able to say, okay, but also, with the analytics, have you thought about monetizing that? Like creating a premium, because they're saying, they're finding they're also not growing. So you're like, okay, well, have you thought about different revenue streams, monetizing, maybe having a premium offering? And like we can learn, like based on like what we've seen with other companies similar to theirs, are they doing that? You know what I mean? So that's something
Yeah.
that we know, or we can use that storytelling of like, well, Dan over here at XYZ company, they're telling us this, and use the storytelling, use our, our current customers to figure out like, they probably haven't even thought about this, and uses and opens up another channel for why they need to buy.
Yeah, it's two reactions to that. One, that's what buyers said they want in this buyer study, and the other reaction is it's kind of a cool job. Like as I'm hearing, like that's a role
Yeah.
as a seller. That's different than selling stuff. That's like problem solving,
Yep.
and again,
Yep.
almost pure consulting in a sense. So I want to go back. I skipped over. I had a follow up about this human aspect about getting people comfortable and confident. Is there? I imagine the first time words come out of Reb's mouth doing this is not in front of a customer. And how do you practice and prepare them for this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So definitely, I am all about, again, I love sports, and you don't see anybody good at sports that doesn't practice, right?
Yeah.
So I am all for, depending if it's new messaging, we'll do a certification. If it's a skills type thing, like we're teaching hypothesis selling, then we're going to do role playing and practice, and that's why I said learn, try, do. So we'll teach a concept, try it through role plays and practice, and then we'll have them do it. And then always on the end of that reinforcement, which I call the coaching, working with our managers to go listen to calls or participate in calls and use those coaching worksheets to give them feedback. So I think it's a 360 degree, and that never stops.
Yeah. But
So I think that's
it's
super
it's
important.
it's such a de-risker because I think the fear, if you have I mean once you've done this and you get your chops, but man,
Yep.
if you're making that transition from just sort of I don't know, pushing stuff to doing that kind of work,
Yeah.
that's a really big change, but again also really valuable to the rep, I believe.
Yep. I
So
think so.
um is there ever any pushback? Where can it go wrong? I'm trying to think of like I love this idea of disconfirming data. I remember reading once that scientists, as opposed to normal humans like us, scientists have an idea
Yeah.
and they go actively look for disconfirming data. So with this, is there ever a pushback from a customer because it's a pretty proactive. I don't want to go as far as intrusive, but it's different than maybe what they're
Well,
used to hearing.
sure. I mean, you're always going to have those customers like, look, I don't want to have this conversation. I just want to see a demo.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No.
And so,
Yes, that was my point precisely.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, I don't really care that you want to help me. So,
Yeah.
um, but I think that we have to, part of that is like we're very particular in our sales process on like the things that they need to be gathering before we start, and we're working on putting rigor in all of that. And I think it's, building confidence in your sales team,
Yeah.
and having that curiosity, and having that, like you said, I mean, enablers are helpers by anyway, but we need to want to help our buyers, right?
Yeah.
We want to help them. And so I think if we come across as authentic and authentically curious, most people will do care and will listen. Yeah, you're always going to get the few that are like, I don't have time for this. I just want a demo. So,
Yeah. But it's interesting too because I just read a really good article about demoing with a purpose, and I'm seeing the ability to integrate even when someone says I just want a demo, you
yeah,
can still demo and say this feature allows you to expand into this market or avoid this
absolutely.
potential bad consequence. So yeah, even
Yes,
even that isn't bad pushback. Yeah,
exactly.
my last question is kind of a really tactical one. When I first started the podcast, I thought we're going to talk about all these really big, like strategic, high level
Right.
CRO issues. And what's turned out after like 65 episodes is we're all kind of still struggling with the basics in some way,
Yep.
which and so we've leaned into that. And speaking of that, you said that one of the things you still struggle with is qualification, or the team often struggles with is qualification. And I'm hearing this a lot. In fact, I was
Yeah.
at a strategic account management conference a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a guy after a talk that I did, and he said, I can tell you if the deal's not properly qualified, it will not renew. Right?
Right.
If it isn't qualified and they're not going to buy in a way that's going to help them, and that was one of the first times, like, boom, qualification to me was always about, are we going to get the deal? And he took it immediately to renewal. And he gave me an
You're
example. So
right.
yeah, talk to me about the qualification challenges.
Yeah, no, that's you are so right, and that is something that we
Yeah.
like everybody's struggling right now with renewal, and so you want to get good customers that are going to stick with you and hopefully grow with you because it's much cheaper to grow a customer than it is to go continue to find new ones. But yeah, with qualification here, I really think a lot of our struggles have really been about, it's been a tough couple years in the market.
Yeah.
So that 5 to 7 whatever times pipeline that that we may have enjoyed a few years ago is down to 2 to 3. And so I think with that, it's a natural inclination to go, okay, I may not get another lead, so I got to make this one work. So I think they're hesitant to to walk away from deals, to qualify out. And,
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last time, there's 2 winners in a deal, the one that closes the deal and the one that gets out early. Because if
Right.
it's,
Right.
and so I think for us, we have really, and I'm super happy the way that things are going right now because it's getting so much better. When our new CRO came in, we had things sitting in discovery for months and months and months. People didn't want to walk away from it, and they weren't moving it forward. We've cleaned that up. And one of the things we've done again is having, I mentioned, rigor in our sales process. So we've been very particular in our exit criteria, almost like a checklist. Like,
Yeah.
here's the 5 things you have to move something from discovered to qualify to POC or whatever. And so, and then we've had inspection. We started to do some inspections. We've even had like biweekly calls where people come on and they actually talk about their deals. And did you capture those 5 things? And if you didn't, well, why not? And why did you move it to the next stage? And so we've actually gotten to the point where we're like, okay, we're moving on to the next stage because people are getting it. And I think it's
Yeah.
just paying attention, being very specific, so, and, like, don't, if you don't have a next step, don't move on. It's like, and you might, and like you said, it's back to the basics. You think, well, that's a no brainer. But, when you're in an environment where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have that many deals coming in, people have a tendency to, hold on to them. And so I think
Yeah.
teaching them that, like, it's okay to let it go because let's focus on the ones that are in our ICP. They're going to be super successful by going with us. And so I think that's really worked, again, just by going back to the basics and really, really refocusing on what do we mean
Yeah.
by,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I was in a conversation with our CTO once who was talking about software engineering. He said, fail fast.
yes,
And it's just so funny. But as a lifelong salesperson, sales leader, sales consultant, it's
yep,
like that notion makes total sense. But it was I struggled with it. But your point about pipe, like we could do a whole
yeah,
podcast on this. I've heard 2x. It used to be 4 to 6x, and now it's 2.
I know.
The other thing that was just reported again by Jim Dickey was that the last 10 years, top of the funnel has been the top investment for sales teams, and win rate has remained flat. And his prediction, and you said it for 2024,
Yeah.
is the focus is on what's in there, and it's a
Yes.
higher win rate, and then it's maximizing and optimizing those deals. It's a different playbook
It
in
is.
in the economy, the macro economy that you just talked about. It's a different playbook, and if we're leaning into what we did the last 10 years, not going to do
Yep.
it.
We can't. You're
Excellent.
exactly right.
This this is a really fun chat. So you've been like super generous with your time and your ideas. And I think of the podcast, like we've got this community of us that do this job, and it's quite stressful, various aspects of this job.
It is.
And having the community is helpful. And to that end, for folks that are listening, Dan, our producer, just sort of lump these podcasts into categories, and I think if we're struggling with a specific issue, this one might live in, the methodology or the enablement category. And it's
Yeah.
really cool to hear from our peers who are, again, generous with their time. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. No, I absolutely enjoyed our conversation, and I love talking about this stuff. I have a passion for it. And
Clearly.
so a lot of fun.
Thank you.